welcome our first guest to the floor. We're very excited to have our next performer here. Our next performer was touched by the hand of God at the tender age of 4. He was touched again by the hand of God at the age of 5. At 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, he was touched yet again. Suffice it to say that God can't take his hands off our next performer. In keeping with the theme of hands, our next performer has single-handedly converted many big stars of the adult film industry, one at a time, and in threesomes, foursomes, and fivesomes, and sometimes he did it with no hands. Our next performer is a standout preacher, a standout teacher, and a standout feature. He's been there and done that too. He's come to deliver a completely improvised sermon just for you. Please give a big welcome to the stage, the mighty, mighty preacher, the Reverend Raymond Nader!
This heathen just showed up right now as I enter the stage, and I'm gonna plop her down here, and I'm gonna save her! Hello, hello, hallelujah, hallelujah, amen, glory to God, say hallelujah. I want you to say that anytime the Spirit moves you. I am the Reverend Raymond Nader, come to give you a completely improvised sermon. I just made a rectangle or something like that. And it's going to be based on a suggestion that you provide when I call out for it. It's going to be a specific kind of suggestion. It's going to be a suggestion of a sin, or something like a sin, something bad, something wrong, something horrendous, something dirty, whatever you think is sinful. I want you to think of the first thing, and I'll bring that to mind, and then I want you to think of the second thing that comes to mind, and that, at the count of 3, I want you to shout out. 1, 2, 3.
Gyrogluttony.
What's that?
Gyrogluttony.
Gyrogluttony. When I think of gyrogluttony, which I do not know, but I think I might learn about. Gluttony is the imposition of food inside one's body over and over and over again. And gyrogluttony is about spinning it inside your body. Would I be anywhere near correct?
But it's God's gyrogluttony.
God's gyrogluttony. Que confusion! If I were a Mexican, I would say, but I go for it. I feel God in my hand when I hear gyrogluttony as the suggestion. I know perhaps you have experienced gyrogluttony. You seem like a familiar folk to me, and I have a little bit of intimate feelings for you and with you, and I think I have experienced and seen you have gyrogluttony inside you. I know perhaps you've experienced gyrogluttony. You've taken a little sandwich, maybe a Subway. You've had the 6-inch sandwich and you went for the foot long. And then one day you said to the Bengali person, you say, Kamanatso, Shakti Supalo. He says, Palo. And you say, I would like to have perhaps a foot long and a half. And he says, I don't know if I can give that to you. You say, you can give it to me, Palo. And you say, and he gives it to you. And then you ask for something else. You ask for a double foot long, and he goes, okay. He gives it to you. He says, ha. You say, yum. He says, nah. He says, ha. You say, ha. And he says, nah. And he says, ha. And he spins it around in your mouth and shoves it down your throat. I know you felt that. And I know perhaps you witnessed it that one time. You know what? You thought you weren't being seen. You thought they said that the cameras were broken down, the surveillance cameras, but someone upstairs saw you. You know that? And look at that finger pointing at the back. I know perhaps you've experienced gyrogluttony. I can't see you at the light, now I can see you at the dark. Because that's when I see you. I see you in the dark. I see you back in the darkness of your apartment, opening the refrigerator door, grabbing anything you can, putting it in your mouth, letting it go down, putting it in your mouth, going back down, and it just makes you shake and move and gyrate. You know, it might seem like a nonsense word, gyrogluttony, but we've experienced it all if you think about it. And that's what I want to tell you about. I, the Reverend Raymond Nader, the Reverend Nader, have experienced gyrogluttony in massive, massive scales. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of something about it. You know, there is something that happens down at Coney Island. Perhaps you remember hearing about it in the 90s, perhaps the early noughts, but you heard about it. It was a common competition between some guy, I want to say his name was something, I don't know. Does someone know his name? Takayachi. So say it again. Teriyaki. Teriyaki was his name. That's right. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen.
Teriyaki used to stuff teriyaki down his throat. He was a competitive eater. He could eat all complete. He ate so much teriyaki, it was just amazing. He couldn't believe it. And there was some young boy, if you remember correctly. Maybe you don't remember correctly. Maybe you think you remember correctly, but there was some young boy, some young man he was. He looked like a young boy, a young man, and his name was by the Reverend Raymond Nader. And he competed against Mr. Teriyaki in this Coney Island competition. We thought it was teriyaki originally, and it turned out, we found out it was Nathan's hot dogs. And that's what they trained with. They trained with Nathan's hot dogs. They'd stuck them down the throat. They'd stuck them down the throat. They'd stuck them down the throat. Hallelujah, they'd stuck them down the throat. And that's how they practiced. There was teriyaki in what he did. And then there was I, the Reverend Raymond Nader, the Reverend Nader. I would practice. I would spin round and round. Not only the food around in my gullet, but how, in my mind, I would spin around the ideas of how am I going to stick all this massive food inside my body. It wasn't just competitive for me, no. I was a competitive eater because I was a compulsive eater. I had to eat whatever was in front of me. I know you know that feeling. That's the devilish side of it. You feel compelled to eat something. You just realize, ooh, it's in my fridge. Look at these cashews. Look at this cashew again. Look at this cashew again. Why do I eat all these cashews? It reminds me of my mama. You keep eating, you keep eating, you keep eating, and suddenly you're fat. And it's not just there. You don't stop at the fat. You're like, oh, I feel so bad. I did. That's why I eat cashews. I think of mama. I thought I was just going to go with the raw cashews and stick with them. No, I went for the sugary kind. I went from the salty kind. I started putting them in my mouth. I then digressed. I moved from the cashews because all of the cravings and the sugar and the salt built up inside me. I moved to the chocolate-covered pretzels, and I brought them in my mind, in my home, and I brought yogurt-covered almonds and put them in my home, and you think they're healthy, but no, they're not. It's the sugar, and slowly you've seen those ads of the soft drinks pouring down, and suddenly fat falls out. Well, if you look around my heavenly body, you don't see that anymore, but you used to see something called donuts, something called muffin tops, something like that around me. But I didn't let that stop me. No, not even the image in the mirror, not even the lack of beauty that I experienced for myself. I still kept putting stuff in my mouth. But then it digressed from food to sex. And then I had to bring other things into my life. I had not one pornographic movie, but two pornographic movies. I had not two pornographic movies, but 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128 pornographic movies, then 256 pornographic movies, then 500, 528, then 1028, 1028 pornographic movies, then 2046 pornographic movies, then we got up to 16 something. We grew up to that point. I used to know that number. I had a lot of porn. This was all the gluttony. And what was attractive about the pornography that I was seeing the gyrations, seeing the movements. And they stirred something inside me. And they stirred all the gluttony. And when I saw the pornography on there, and I came to the top and I came to the bottom, I grabbed food and I filled it inside me. It's all connected, you see. I was lonely. I did not have a friend. And I realized that I must seek a friend. I was trapped in my body. I didn't know what to do. I had a talent for eating. I had a talent for digesting. You know it, say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
That's right. So I went out. I stalked out. I got on the N train down to Coney Island. I hopped off the N train at Coney Island. I turned left to the beach, and I came across that wonderful sign. Perpendicular to around the corner of the Nathan's hot dog stand, the championship banner for the big eat-off. And my calling was there. I did not hear the sound of God when I looked at that big old banner. No, instead I heard something that sounded evil, the devil, telling me to join, to participate, to seek it out, and seek it out I did. I went to the sandy area called the beach. I went to the beach and I said, "Point me to this competitive eating contest. I need to compete." And someone came up, looked up from his teriyaki eating, and he said something that I would be offensive if I tried to approximate. He said in Japanese something, but I could understand it. I had the devil translating for me. He was gonna be my friend. I was no longer gonna be lonely, but I was still gonna eat. And then we practiced together. I said we were together at a time. We practiced, we were competitive, but we were working together. And then we watched the same pornography together. And we watched the same eating. And we both love raw cashews. They both remind us of Mama. And flash forward to that time when we were on the stage. That moment, I would call it penultimate, but it was the ultimate moment when I was on stage with teriyaki and I was on stage with a mound, a city full of hot dogs. And that's when the inner gyrations started taking. My intestines started to wrap around each other, anticipating this. My stomach then twisted around. My esophagus wrapped around my lungs. My heart started pounding through. And I knew that what I saw right here was going to be something oh so delicious. And I also thought, I am going to beat you. I knew it. You know something. You know when you know something. I knew I was going to be teriyaki, and that's what I was set to do. The timer started, and suddenly I ferociously fed hot dog down my mouth. I dipped the buns in water to shove them down and move it around. I shook my whole body to shake them down. I was giving a show. The show was exciting. They all loved me. They were cheering me on. I was against a Japanese man. It was myself and him and myself and him. I seemed to be doing it at a bigger pace, at a faster pace, shoving it down at accelerated speeds. And then suddenly, I didn't know what that was. There was some kind of noise. You hear that sometimes. You're in the subway, you hear a noise, you turn, you see nothing. You turn, you see nothing. You're on a dark sidewalk, you turn, you see nothing. In this moment, I turned. I saw nothing, but I felt something, camera. I felt something. I knew where to look. There were a whole bunch of people in front of me. I knew it wasn't there. There was a man beside me digesting hot dogs at rapid pace. It wasn't there. It wasn't behind. It wasn't at the trophy to the side. It wasn't at the judges. It wasn't at the clock. Or was it? It was at the clock. I saw the clock ticking down. It was suddenly going to expire. Then I realized it was a message. There was an antenna on top of the clock. I see the clock right here was on top of the clock, and it pointed upwards. I looked up in the clearing sky, the big blue sky in Coney Island, and I saw the Wonder Wheel. Oh, so blessed Wonder Wheel. Oh, so wondrous. Atop that Wonder Wheel, though, was a man. Not a man, a single thing. I don't know what it was. It was something ghostly or spiritual, but it was looking down on me. And suddenly it grew in size, and it was looking right at me. I could see it. I could feel it shooting down to my heart and to my gut. I said, is it you, God? And you know, I don't need to answer that question because you know what he said. You know what he said. He said, yes, it is. So I just answered it. He did say that. I said, God, what's your issue? He says you're a glutton. I said, God, I'm not a glutton. I'm a competitive eater. He says, reevaluate. Look inside yourself. And I looked inside myself. I opened up my mouth. It seems impossible. I opened up my mouth like this Bible here. I opened up and looked inside, and I saw all this half-digested meal and partially digested meat product and blood product and water moving around in here. It's disgusting and horrible and wretched. And inside was not so good. And suddenly God snapped me out. I moved out of my gullet and into my body again. And he said, now, if you take that direction, you will die. I didn't want to become one of those lampoonized death on 1,000 ways to die. No, no, no. I didn't want to die from competitive eating. So I realized at this point I must evacuate the contents. It was at that moment. You remember that part of that first competition. You remember the time when the one guy, whom you didn't remember as me, the one guy vomited to cover the whole audience. You thought it was bad, but it was G-O-D-D good. He spoke to me. They spoke to me like that. At this point, I turned and I said, "That vomit, you win. I leave." I denounced my friendship from him. I went home. I went home to my apartment. I looked at all the pornography and threw it out. And then I went to the refrigerator. Yes, that refrigerator. Opened up the refrigerator. Got the cashews out. Put my finger in them. And that was how I overcame my gyrogluttony. I want to thank you for that suggestion, sir. And I want to say thank you for being such a wonderful audience. It was a completely improvised sermon on the suggestion of gyrogluttony. And I want to say to you, hallelujah.